Nobody knows that.
You doing okay? Good morning. Good morning, Jim. Good morning.
Well, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Today we formalize a banner accomplishment in Illinois' long history addressing our pension challenges. In passing the bipartisan pension reform legislation, Democrats and Republicans in this General Assembly have demonstrated a monumental willingness to prioritize responsible and sustainable fiscal management of our state. In other words, taking another step toward putting state government back on the side of Illinois' working families. For more than 70 years, that's 13 governors and 35 General Assemblies, we've watched the patchwork of local, police, and fire pension funds expand into the second largest number of individual systems in the nation. And through all those decades, they also watched as the clear solution, the consolidation of suburban and downstate funds, eluded a solution, aided by ideology, bickering, political games, and stagnation. No longer. Bipartisanship in this General Assembly has achieved what none of their predecessors have been able to do: consolidate 650 downstate and suburban pension funds into just two, amplifying their investment power and reducing the burden on property taxpayers. Working together, we are helping hundreds of cities all across the state of Illinois to alleviate their spiraling property tax burdens. And just as importantly, we're showing that Illinois can tackle its most intractable problems. There are many, many people to thank who made this day possible. And I'll start with our sponsors, Leader Jay Hoffman and Senator Christina Castro, who led the charge in the General Assembly. They worked closely with the many other legislators, many here today, Senator Don DeWitt, Senator Robert Martwick, Leader Kelly Burke, Representative Karina Villa, Representative Mike Zaleski, Representative Mark Walker, Representative Kathleen Willis, Representative Sam Yingling, Representative Lamont Robinson, Representative Mark Batnick, Representative Ryan Spain, Representative Jeff Kiker, and Representative Dan Ugasti. And of course, the members of the Illinois Pension Consolidation Task Force, especially the three co-chairs, who spent countless hours building consensus and moving us forward. Bill Brodsky, who has led some of our state's largest and most high-profile financial institutions. Pat Devaney, the president of the Associated Firefighters of Illinois and now the secretary-treasurer of the state AFL-CIO, and former Senate Republican leader Christine Radonio. I also want to thank Brad Cole from the Illinois Municipal League and Tim Kobler of the Illinois Fraternal Order of Police, as well as all of our task force members for keeping their members at the table and uniting to bring this across the finish line. And I am very proud of the team in my governor's office who worked on this. Deputy Governor Dan Hines, ably assisted by Cameron Mock, who never gave up even during some tough moments in the negotiations. A little giggling behind me, everybody knows. What we celebrate here today is monumental. One of the most critical long-term challenges that we face in Illinois is our underfunded local pension liabilities and the surging property tax burdens that they create. The consolidation of these funds could result in greater returns of up to $2.5 billion over just the next 5 years. And they will likely earn billions more over the next 20 years. This consolidation also marks a vital step forward for our fiscal future, a future that we've already strengthened through our bipartisan balanced budget that starts to pay down the backlog of bills from our predecessor. As we've all said from the beginning, the work of this task force isn't done. And over the coming months and years, It will continue to meet to discuss other challenges, including Chicago's pensions and the statewide pension systems, because I believe that solutions and efficiencies can be found for all of these systems. And as we look to the future, my commitment to the people of Illinois is that I will always stand strong to make sure that we keep our promises to our retirees and that we will make our pension systems and our state's finances stronger than they are today. And now it's my pleasure to introduce one of our partners who has been a terrific ally in Springfield and a real force in getting this done, Senator Christina Castro.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, and thank you for joining us here today. When I was first elected in 2016 to the General Assembly, I had heard one of the difficult problems that Illinois faced was the pension crisis. After serving for almost 3 years, I can confirm that to be true. Nearly every single fiscal issue that arises basically just boils down to pensions. You passed a balanced budget? Great. How about pensions? And that was the constant theme we heard on different large issues that we tackled, from school funding reform to a lot of the major pieces of legislation we moved this year. The constant theme that we hear back in our districts as legislators is, what are we going to do about pensions? Pensions is a promise that we should be keeping to our first responders. And that's one thing that this bill did, is that we keep that in mind because they did what they were supposed to do. We, as previous General Assemblies, have failed them. And we kept kicking the can down the road. And I didn't want to be a part of that anymore. One of the things when I got elected is we have to make tough decisions. We have to sit down in a bipartisan with all the stakeholders to try to address this issue. And I wanted to do it in a way that was fair for both the taxpayers whose tax dollars were essentially being wasted and the hardworking people who earned those pensions. I'm thrilled to be here with Governor Pritzker as we finalize the first step of fixing our state's looming pension crisis. This, by no means, is the final step, but it is a great place to get started. There are over 650 downstate pension funds that will be consolidated down to 2 over the next 30 months. That is a lot to keep track of, a lot of paperwork, in other words, a lot of waste. Cutting out wasteful spending is one of the quickest and easiest ways to reduce the burden on taxpayers. Once the consolidation is completed, we'll be saving nearly $160 million annually, which will allow that money to be better invested into the services that the people of Illinois can rely on. That we were able to achieve this with no adverse effects to the pensioners' benefits is a testament to the tremendous effort put in by the various advocacy groups that were a part of the task force. This is a simple, reasonable, and common sense solution to one of Illinois' most pressing issues, accomplished in a way that is beneficial to all parties involved. I would like to thank Governor Pritzker for working so closely alongside us to get this through the General Assembly. I'd also like to thank Deputy Governor Dan Hines, Cameron Mock, the Pension Consolidation Feasibility Task Force, especially Brad Cole from the IML, Pat Devaney from the Associated Firefighters of Illinois, and the Fraternal Order of Police, Tim Kobler. I also would like to thank Chief House Sponsor Jay Hoffman, as well as my colleagues on both sides of the aisle in both the House and the Senate. I look forward to working with everyone during future legislative sessions as we continue down the path toward fixing the crisis once and for all. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to introduce Leader Jay Hoffman.
Well, thank you very much, Senator. First of all, I don't know if she is here, but she was here. Mary Cahill, there she is. Mary Cahill was the House staffer who, I don't know that much about pensions, I'll just be very honest. Mary knows a lot about pensions. I would just like to indicate and reiterate what the senator said. The governor really was the leader. 650 pension funds throughout the state, police and fire. And I got to tell you, if it wasn't for the firefighters and the police organizations actually being willing to sit down to fix a crisis that was a long time coming and was going to get worse, we wouldn't be here today. They're willing to sit down, negotiate, because those 650 individual pension funds, they all have their members that sit on them. And so do the municipalities. And Brad Cole, the Municipal League, was a leader in this as well. So basically what happened was the employer and the employees sat down and said, we're going to have to do something. We're going to cut down on the waste in the system. We're going to put our pension dollars together to make sure that we get a greater investment return, improve the economies of scale, but at the same time, we're going to have a fair process to make sure that each individual pension fund is treated differently so that we're not combining one good pension fund with a bad pension fund. We're only doing it for investment purposes. That idea and that concept really came because we worked in a bipartisan fashion in the House and the Senate. And I'd like to just thank my colleagues in the House who are here, Democrats and Republicans, who led the way on this for so many years. This wasn't easy. It was difficult. It took the governor's leadership, but it also took bipartisan effort in the House and the Senate. It also took people who are much smarter than me sitting down and coming up with solutions to difficult problems. And Bill Brodsky led that effort along with the firefighters, Pat Devaney, as well as other individuals. Senator Radonio were the head of the task force that came up with this idea, came up with this concept, and because of their efforts and their abilities, we were able to pass this bill. It's going to become law today. So with that, co-chair of that task force, Mr. Bill Brodsky.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. First, I want to congratulate Governor Pritzker for recognizing the need to deal with pensions and by appointing the task force during the first weeks of his administration. Second, I want to thank my task force co-chairs, Christine Radonio, Pat Devaney, along with Brad Cole, Tim Kobler, and Mayor Darch and others, who, through their hard work, we were able to work together in a very collegial way. And special thanks also to Deputy Governor Dan Hines and Cameron Mock, who really held us together. So we thank you. Third, the fact that there are 649 downstate pension and suburban police and fire pension funds has cried out for reform, as you heard a few minutes ago. Decades of underperformance, high administrative expenses, and duplication demanded change. The status quo was unacceptable and manifestly unsustainable. The investment business, of which I have spent my entire career, is undergoing a massive change. In no place is it more evident than the field of investment management. These changes are the result of advances in automation and magnified by competition and efficiencies based on the scale of the funds under management. The goal of the task force was to maximize the returns of the assets for the benefit of the first responders and their families, and to minimize the costs of those who fund those pension plans, the taxpayers of Illinois. The legislation represents a balanced approach based on thoughtful discussion and compromise. While there's more to do, we strongly believe that these recommendations are a significant step in improving the performance of these funds and hence the funding of these many pension funds. Congratulations to Governor Pritzker and his team, along with the legislature, for passing this law, which has been many years in the making. The governor's leadership was the catalyst that allowed this to happen. Congratulations.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. I'll provide this introduction. I want to introduce somebody who, without whose hard work, diligence, persistence, we could not have reached the conclusion that we did, and that's the head of the IML, and that's Brad Cole.
Thank you, Bill, for that introduction. And good morning. I am Brad Cole, Executive Director of the Illinois Municipal League. I'm joined today by North Chicago Mayor Leon Rockingham Jr., President of the Illinois Municipal League, and Barrington Mayor Karen Darch, a past president of the league. Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Governor, for your leadership during this process, and thanks to each of the legislators and numerous individuals here today who participated in the meetings and who worked lengthy hours, which is fine, but did in fact work lengthy hours to lead to this bill's passage and its signing today. Consolidating the assets of the more than 650 downstate public safety pension funds throughout Illinois will help provide stronger investment returns for active and retired public safety employees and reduce redundant administrative costs on Illinois taxpayers. This is a good first step forward on the complicated and comprehensive issue of pensions. We look forward to continuing the discussion about pension reform, specifically as it relates to the City of Chicago's and the State of Illinois' funds, and we are ready to get started on the transition and implementation of this legislation. Governor Pritzker, we especially recognize your commitment to this issue and your personal engagement to think big and see common sense solutions enacted to address long-standing problems facing the state and its cities, villages, and towns. Our next speaker is Tim Kobler, representing the Labor Council for the Fraternal Order of Police. Tim?
Good morning. I would like to take this time to just thank the governor, his staff, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle who took a look at this. We sat down and we worked really hard, and it took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of listening and understanding to create something here that is going to be extremely beneficial, not just to law enforcement officers and firefighters, but to the taxpayers of the state of Illinois as well. So again, I'd like to thank the governor for his leadership. I'd like to thank him for allowing me to participate in the task force as well as my colleagues on the task force. And with that, I will introduce Pat Devaney, who is the president of the Firefighters Association.
Thanks, Tim. Good morning, everyone. I'm joined here today by members of the Associated Firefighters of Illinois Executive Board. The AFFI is the state association that represents 15,000 professional firefighters and paramedics across Illinois. We are very proud to be here to watch the governor sign this bill, and on behalf of all of us, I have to offer our sincere gratitude to your work leading this effort. I called it historic because many people don't know pension fund consolidation for police and firefighters have been discussed over the last 75 years, but each time we got close to the finish line, it failed. And I believe why this time is different is because we had a governor in his 11th month in office that chose to be a leader and do things that were right and on behalf of working people like he's done throughout this session. And I'd like to thank him on behalf of the firefighters for it. Thank you, Governor. So he's adding this to the unprecedented list of things that he's done for working people over the course of this year. But he certainly wasn't alone in this effort. Assistant Majority Leader Jay Hoffman used his talents in diplomacy and negotiations to bring an otherwise unwieldy group to an agreement through this process. And Senator Christina Castro, also the Senate Pensions Chair, she was a fierce advocate in the Senate and had to overcome quite a bit of opposition for those who wish to embrace the status quo and see others benefit from our pension dollars as opposed to the funds and its participants. In the end, this was a win-win-win. It's a win for the firefighters, police officers that rely on these pensions as their sole source of retirement income. It's a win for our elected officials that are charged with balancing local municipal budgets, lean municipal budgets. And it's certainly a win for taxpayers for the hundreds of millions of dollars in property tax savings that we're going to realize as a result of this effort. So again, on behalf of all of us, thank you, Governor Pritzker and members of the General Assembly for making this happen. And let's sign this bill.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Governor.
I've had more pens. This is a lot of pens.
Got it? All right.
Yeah. Well, you're right. The number of systems has ballooned. Nobody expected 600 and turns out 49 pension systems across the state. In fact, when, and I read some of the previous reports over the last 70 years, those numbers were, 100, 150, 200, and so on, growing. So, I mean, what I can say is that I don't think that local municipalities now think about creating those pension funds anymore at very small numbers. So whether whether there's legislation around it or not, I would suggest to you that it's not something that's on the minds of many of the municipalities around the state to go create more. I'm happy to turn it over to Brad Cole if you have anything to add to that, but I think that's how I would look at it. I don't.
It says like,
Yeah. Well, all I can say is that, as you know, there are areas where no pension fund has been created. And so I think with the advent of this legislation, it's unlikely anyway that we'll see an expansion. But I don't offer you an opposition to it. I just say it's not something that we considered. And I want to also point out that this pension task force was really looking specifically at how to consolidate the investment returns for purposes of investment returns, and came up with a bunch of really good ideas in order to get there, and it's why they were able to reach some success on it. So.
Could it argue that two offices can get the calculations right for benefits for 649 different funds?
Well, they're not. So the two investment offices, and that's really what they'll be, aren't going to be determining the local benefits. Those will be made at the local level by the people who sit on those local boards. Those local boards are not going to be making investment decisions, however, and that's really, again, how we're going to be able to bring billions of dollars more into the system.
Governor, as you may know, wire points and other entities estimate the overall total pension unfunded liability for the state of Illinois and cities and village governments at about $340 billion. And they also, WirePoints and other entities, say this bill, while useful and good, they acknowledge that, at best addresses maybe 5% of that $340 billion liability. So what would be the path forward in terms of specific programs to fit to that?
Sure. We have
those, the city of Chicago, which is, as you know, excluded from the state of Illinois that's excluded, how do you get at that bigger issue, that 95%?
So let me start with, organizations like WirePoints want to diminish what's been accomplished here by saying, well, we have so much more to do. The reality is that so little has been done in the past, and this is a monumental accomplishment after 70 years of people trying. It is evidence that we can tackle the most intractable problems of our state. It is also evidence that we have a lot of challenges and that we've got to go at it every single day, every week, every month, particularly in the area of pensions. And I've been doing that. I mean, everybody around here knows that the challenges that I've identified on the fiscal side of things, on the economic growth side of things, pensions, property taxes, balancing the budget, diminishing our backlog of bills, and then growing jobs in the state, that those are things that I think about every single day, that I've proposed solutions to, that I continue to work on. We can't get it all done at once. And it's true that we have a pension net liability that we have to address, and we are addressing it. As you saw just in the first half of the year, we were able to get past a broadening of the pension buyout program, which now is being taken up by the 5 state systems that have the ability to do that. And it's expanded, as it's been introduced, more people have chosen that buyout, and about the number, a little bit greater than the number, depending on which system you look at, than was expected in the first place. So that's one area in which we've made progress. A lot more to do. I don't want to diminish anything that you're suggesting needs to be done. But I do also want to call out that there are organizations in the state that just want to beat up on the state of Illinois, even though they live here, and not recognize that we all know there are challenges and that we're addressing them. And maybe they would like some, silver bullet one-time solution to everything. It doesn't exist. I would like that too. If there was something you could do that would, fix all of the challenges, there aren't. There are a lot of things we need to do, and I've gotten at it from day one. I'm not stopping. We're continuing on into this next session and for the next 3 years.
Just one follow-up on that. So the buyout program, which you just mentioned, I know you've talked about it before at the fireside chat with the Chicago Economics Club. And I think you threw out a number there, potential savings of about $25 billion. Wire points and others, again, have questioned whether you'll have enough people sign up to get anything like that. And when you look at all the costs of financing that, whether you can do it. Do you have documentation that somebody could make available after this from your staff that would document that $25 billion projected savings?
Well, the numbers on savings, and there are several different estimates that have been given, but the number on savings were actually given by an outside consulting firm that was brought in, to one of our agencies to look at, and so. So all I would say is that what we really are looking at is the uptake rate. That's the thing that you want to look at to see how well we're going to do going forward. And it's been, at least in one of the larger systems above 20%. In another one where it only got introduced more recently, the number was more like 15% or 16%. But again, hasn't really been marketed fully to all the people who could.
15%?
Correct. These are just Illinois systems. Yeah, the state of Illinois, correct, not the local pension systems that we're talking about. But I do want to also acknowledge, you asked a good question, one other aspect of what you raised. We have pension challenges at different levels of government, right? I've talked about the city of Chicago's pension challenges. This was downstate and suburban police and fire first responder pensions. We have the statewide state worker pension systems for the state. All of them need to be addressed. This pension task force that I put together is kind of a rolling effort to try to address them. We couldn't do it all at once. It was near impossible. Months and hours, you heard Brad Cole talk about the hours and hours that were put in just to address this issue. And so we're continuing. It's on a rolling basis. We're trying to address every level of pensions. And I guess you should recognize, though, that as governor of the state, that I don't look at cities as if it's some separate thing from what my responsibilities are. I'm trying to lift up our cities, our towns, our villages all across the state because I'm governor of all the people who live in those villages and towns and cities. Lowering their property taxes, finding ways to diminish the net pension liability over time for them is just as much a part of what we do in state government as addressing the state pension systems. Yes, sir.
What would you like to say to the Black Caucus across the street that wants to delay legal weed 6 months?
Well, I would say, I'd like to say, meet Toy Hutchinson, who I will introduce momentarily. But let me just begin, though, by saying that 11 states have legalized cannabis for adult use. And our state carefully crafted an equity-centric bill, the only one, really. One that I think you'll hear from Toy that other states are calling to copy because they see what was done here. And that one of the principal challenges that wasn't overcome in those other states that we're overcoming is the challenge of providing capital for people who are looking to start these businesses. Because it's easy to say we're going to have a social equity components, but if you can't afford to get into the business and you're a person of color or someone who's just been left out from around the state, then you'll never get into the business. And so that's why the bill was crafted as it was. There were constitutional experts who were focused on it. This was crafted over the course of 2 years, not a month and a half of quick debate. And we're proud of the bill as it was put together. But I want to turn it over to Toy in case she has a few things to add.
Things to add. So essentially, a level set first. This is the result of hundreds and hundreds of hours. 2 pretty hostile governors, 4 years of travel and debate and negotiation, and then we got a governor who came to this issue understanding that the most important thing we could do is to insert social equity and criminal justice reform into this prospect. So to characterize this as something as anything other than the strongest, most equity-centric thing that is happening in the country right now is offensive on its face. Because that would deny the fact that we looked at the phases that had to come into this. Like the first phase, the licensure from the original operators funds this the revolving loan program, which we announced yesterday. So the number one barrier to entrance is access to capital, and we created a revolving loan to help seed social equity applicants. We needed sales to start so that we could fund the money to go into community reinvestment programs, because equity is way bigger than just who owns it. It's also what you do with the money, and it's also how you undo the harms that were actually done during the entire prohibition. It's funny, we were all talking about the pension system. For 75 years, people have been doing this. Well, for about 80 years, people have been over-targeted and over-policed by the failed war on drugs, and when we finally get to the point where we're ready to start to turn the industry around and undo that really, really significant damage, now is not the time to go backwards. We're really only trying to move forward here. So it's disappointing, but we're going to keep it moving. We are going to keep this moving. We have a loan program that's coming out right now. We're pulling together all of the resources that we need to do to be able to deploy resources to the hardest hit communities. And we just watched Kim Foxx last week announce the first 100 of the first 1,000 batch of people for criminal expungements. This equity is big, and we really want everybody who cares enough about it to come with us and do the work that it takes to actually do this. That's not something that happens like this. That takes hours and hours and years, and people who are committed from the beginning to get this done. This industry has existed for 5 years. It's existed in its totality for 5 years, all white. This is the first I've heard anybody on the city council say anything about that.
So do you have a contingency plan worked out, in case it does go through today? With IDFR and with all the other agencies involved to address not just, what would happen to the loan program and the careful rollout dates that you had, but also make sure that the medical supply isn't, do you have contingency plans if things don't go your way across the street?
Yeah, we have. So on the medical issue, the state has tools at its disposal. We're watching, we're paying attention to every single thing that happens in this industry. When we say we track from seed to sale, we mean we track from seed to sale. We know exactly what is happening, and we're watching to see how we can deal with any potential shortages that happen, including finding dispensaries for not having the product available at the same levels as they had before the law went into effect. It would be very disappointing to short the community reinvestment funds that are designed to go directly into the hardest hit areas, which are across the south and west sides. That would be extremely disappointing. It would be extremely disappointing to not be able to fully fund a revolving loan program, which does not exist anywhere else in the state, and I want to be really clear about this. I'm getting calls from people around the country and around the world, as far away as New Zealand, to talk about what Illinois did, because every equity program that has happened at the city level usually fails when there's no capital invested behind it. So the whole point of each phase of this rollout is because they all work together. So we need people to actually truly understand what's happening, and then work with us to make sure that we do what everybody says they want, which is to increase diversity into this industry, to undo the harms of the war on drugs, and to reinvest and rebuild the communities that have been hit hardest about this. This proposal right now seeks to describe this in a way that is patently false. And we need help, not hurt. So this is going to do more harm than good. If it doesn't go our way, it'll do more harm than good to the very thing we all say we're supposed to care about.
So is this a communication problem or is this a political problem? Why is this happening, and have you talked to the Black Caucus about this?
Oh, I've had many meetings. I've had many meetings with my friends. And I do believe that there's some politics at play, absolutely. Because it's very difficult for me to hear people describe a 615-page bill as though there's no plan, because that's 615 pages of a plan to do something. And it took a lot of time to get that done. It's not like we just came up with this a month and a half ago. This has been a labor of intention for years. So we're just waiting and watching like everybody else.
You both made similar statements 2 weeks ago, I think it was, about the same issue, included there are people who haven't been swayed. So what have you been trying to do behind the scenes, or what other arguments have you been making?
Oh, we're working. We're working. We're actually working. So we announced the loan program. We've been present when the first expungements are rolling out. We're designing the program with the Lieutenant Governor's office to do the community reinvestment thing. There is nothing that's happening politically that's stopping us from doing the work that we've been charged to do. And like I said, it took 2 hostile governors, 4 years. We got a governor who believed in it, believed in us, and pushed everybody forward as only a chief executive who understands equity can do. And we got a 615-page bill over a finish line in May, signed it in June. We're going to roll this thing out in January. And right now is when people are saying, oh, well, maybe we need to regroup. We needed you there 3 years ago. Now we are working, and we are working every single day to make sure that this bill is implemented with the intention of the sponsors as a policy of the state to turn this ship around and to make us a leader in the country and teach other states how to come behind us and do this. And like I said, it is wholly fascinating to get calls from around the country and then have to take questions like this.
Do you feel like you're having to go in there and do the work that the mayor should be doing? Because, she's ostensibly on your side, but, you're the one who is being, having to answer questions about this day in and day out and be the voice. Do you think that the mayor is not pulling her own weight?
I am happy to discuss what this bill is, what this law is designed to do, because when I was in the General Assembly, and I love that I'm standing here with all my colleagues talking about their topic, and I was a drafter of this. So I can talk to anybody who wants to talk to me about how hard we worked and how high our hopes are for what this will be. I am happy to talk to anybody about how proud I am to be part of a team that believed in equity and believed in criminal justice reform in a way that no other state has demonstrated. I can talk about that all day long, to anybody who wants to hear it, because what we know is that the time is now to keep working to move this system, and it is a big, complicated thing to move. It is not something that happens on day one. It is something that we are all going to have to be committed to playing the long game on.
The mayor's office is saying that you guys are committed to reworking your application rules for the medical program to include social equity components. First of all, is that true? And second of all, what other concessions are you prepared to make to try and convince them?
We passed a medical cleanup bill for the medical industry that included equity language for those medical dispensaries. So we are absolutely in agreement that those things are not going to be let until they have the proper rules and language attached to them to make sure that that happens.
Governor, can we go back? Can we go back?
Thank you.
All right.
One time.
Thank you.
Please.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.